if you're new to this, you're a screenwriter, just literally write something that's 3 or 4 pages that you can shoot with your iPhone and 2 actors or 1 actor for that matter. Get your friends, get 2 friends that can act a little bit and just go do a short and just try and build, one step at a time.
This episode is brought to you by Bulletproof Script Coverage, where screenwriters go to get their scripts read by top Hollywood professionals. Learn more at covermyscreenplay.com. I'd like to welcome back to the show returning champion, Ashley Scott Meyers. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back on.
Absolutely, man. Well, you have interesting stuff going on all the time in your world. So I thought that this was a great episode to kind of talk about screenwriters transitioning to directing and the wonderful world of low budget filmmaking in general. So for people who don't know who you are, can you just do a quick brief update on who you are? Tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So my name's Ashley Scott Meyers is kind of my professional name that I go for. My friends all call me Ashley. Originally from Maryland, moved out here after college. Typical story to be a screenwriter. Through just really a lot of persistence, I was able to sell a few scripts. And just going through that process, I just realized that it's very, very tough to sell the scripts or get paid writing assignments. And even when you get them, it's not always super creatively fulfilling. And I really was out here to try and, find some creative fulfillment and just try and find, be an artist and do creative things. So that's kind of where I am in my career. And that's, leads me into my own independent film, which I'm just finishing up now and releasing for distribution, is a film that I wrote, directed, and produced called The Pinch.
Awesome. So we're going to get into The Pinch, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the realities of being a working screenwriter, especially working in the genre that you work in and in the budget range that you work, which is kind of like those AFM, American Film Market genre kind of films. What's it really like about doing that? Because there's a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of, oh, you're a working screenwriter. It's all so beautiful and lovely. What's the reality behind it?
Yeah. So, I mean, and I'm a big proponent of these genre films, these AFM genre movies, because as a screenwriter starting out, those are legitimately your best opportunities. The competition, the really A-list screenwriters are not vying for those jobs. If you're trying to sell a script to Universal, you're competing against the creme de la creme of screenwriting. These lower budget movies that they're making for less than, let's say, $5 million, less than $2 million, in a lot of cases less than $1 million. There's not a ton of money in them, so the competition is not as fierce. Those producers also typically don't have access to the highest level of screenwriting, so they kind of have to make do with what they can find as well. So I don't think it's all a bad situation, and I'm very glad to have had the experiences I had writing some of these movies and working with some of these filmmakers. But just the reality is that it's not creatively fulfilling. You're going to write a script. You're going to send it to one of these producers, these directors. They're going to rewrite it with little to no input from you. Maybe they're going to bring on other writers. Maybe they're just going to write it themselves. And that's going to be the movie. It's not going to be necessarily what you originally had envisioned. If you're okay with that, I don't think that's a bad way to continue to go with your career. I think even at the highest level, there is some of that. Screenwriters really are more craftsmen, and they're really there to support the writer, the writer is really there to support the director and the producer and the actors, as opposed to be the visionary of the project. And I think people kind of have to realize that going into that. And I would offer up, the John August podcast, Script Notes. Go and listen to that and just listen to what they talk about their own careers. They're not just cooking up, spec ideas and selling spec ideas. They're getting paid to write ideas that are coming through networks or coming through producers. And they're basically just working for these producers and these directors and these actors. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's a little bit of a misconception that people go into this. They want to be screenwriters because they have this idea that, oh, I'll just sit on the beach and, be this creative wonder kid and, come up with all these cool ideas. And then I'll email my script over and they'll go make it. And and that's like, it's not really the reality. And it's like, again, even the screenwriting at the highest level, at any level, there's a lot of like business decisions you have to make. There's a lot of salesmanship, marketing, getting yourself out there, networking with people. No matter what level you're at, that's a big part of the equation. And I don't know that people fully appreciate that. Taking another step back, just in terms of the money, I mean, the screenwriter on these independent films can only reasonably expect 2 to 3% of the production budget. So just to make the math easy, on a $1 million film, or let's say a $2 million film, I would say probably $300,000 of that $2 million is going to be for contingency costs, completion bonds, and the screenwriter doesn't get paid. So you're talking about like 1.7 million, things. And then, you can do the math on that 2 to 3%. So you're talking, 30, 40, $50,000. And it sounds like, yeah, I mean, we'd all love to have $50,000, but, it's very, very, it's not like you can just churn these things out at a one a month. So you have to do an incredible amount of work to sell that script. And oftentimes you don't make anything close to that. I mean, some of the films I've worked on have been well less than $1 million. So again, you can do the math on that. To actually make a living with these genre films is not always that easy. I think the idea is to maybe do some of these genre films, grow as a screenwriter, make contacts, and hopefully things will kind of take off from there. But again, you have to go into it understanding that you are always going to be subservient to the producer and the director. Ultimately, whoever has the money, whoever's raised the money, you're going to be subservient to that person.
Now, is that the reason why you decided to write and direct The Pinch?
Yeah, I mean, it is. And it really is. And I went through, I think it was late 2015, I was able to get 2 back-to-back paid writing assignments. And like I said, wow, that sounds great. And it was, I was excited to have these assignments, and they were cool projects, but they weren't particularly well paid. And it was the same sort of thing. It was just creatively, they just were not fulfilling. And I had to work so hard to get myself in a position. I mean, one of these jobs, I had been talking to the producers for probably 2 or 3 years, going to meetings, emailing them, just kind of, doing that stuff, following up with them, trying to stay in touch. And finally, they had a project that they, kicked my way. And I got done, and it was like, what was, I did all this work to get the project. I got the project, and it was just like, what was the point? And so for me, that was when I just decided to make a change and say, okay, I'm going to write something that I know I can shoot on a low budget, even if it means just me and an iPhone and a couple of friends that are actors. I'm going to write something that I know I can get done, just again, for the creative fulfillment of it. And I would say for the most part, it has been successful. I mean, it's been very creatively fulfilling being the one that be able to make those decisions as opposed to not making them, even though obviously I have my hands tied because there's not a lot of money. There's not a big budget.
Right. Exactly. Now, what was the biggest challenge about making this movie?
I think money is always a big problem. And so I think raising money is always a big problem. But I went into this from the get-go with kind of low expectations. I have my own podcast. I have a little bit of a following. So I knew somewhat realistically how much I could raise on Kickstarter. And then I knew what I could personally afford to kick in. I had one other friend who's an actor who got a role. He kicked in a little bit of money. So I basically knew that I set my expectations low enough that I knew I could get the movie made for what it was. So I don't think typically I think money is the hardest thing. I don't know that necessarily was my toughest thing, not because I'm so good at raising money, but just because my expectations were so low. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing for me, and I think a lot of screenwriters face this, is just making that leap. I mean, as a screenwriter, I'm someone who likes to sit by myself with my computer and work on my stuff, work on my own projects and this kind of stuff. So being a producer and a director is much more about working with other people. It's about making those things. So for me, it was kind of getting over that hurdle and just saying, okay, I'm going to put this thing on my back and I'm going to carry it through. I'm not like an extroverted person. I'm not like one of these, gung-ho like guys that can get, the team motivated and stuff. It's like, that's not really part of my personality. I'm disciplined and persistent in sort of my own pursuits, but I've never been that guy that wanted to like motivate other people or have this big team around me and this kind of things. I'm much more sort of independent. So I would say for me, that was the hardest part, was just getting over that hurdle of saying, hey, I've got to go out and make things happen for myself, even though it doesn't necessarily feel like a natural fit for me.
Now, what was the budget?
So basically, I think I'm at a little under $32,000 right now. I raised about $12,000 on Kickstarter, which was kind of my goal originally. That's what I set for my goal, and I knew with my current audience, I thought that was a fairly realistic amount. And then I basically put in whatever 10, 12 or something. I had one actor friend, as I said, put in about 5. And whatever the rest, maybe I put in 13 or 14. I had one other person put in 2,000. But that was basically it. It's me personally financing it. It's 1.5, another friend put in 2, and then the rest was Kickstarter.
Very cool. Now, how did you market the film?
So, and I'm in the process of that. And one of the ways I'm marketing the film is coming on the Indie Film Hustle podcast. So that was not, and that's not, lost on me. And I'm sure you get this too, running your own podcast. I get a lot of publicists coming to me now saying, hey, can you interview this filmmaker, this film? So I'm going back to some of those publicists and saying, hey, I've got my film. What can you do for me? So that's a big part of my marketing effort, is getting out there and just doing these types of things. And I've got another interview this afternoon that the publicist has lined up. So I'm getting out there and doing that sort of promotional stuff. I'm promoting it on my own podcast as well. I'm writing some blog posts, some written interviews, all that sort of stuff. The other piece to this is just in terms of recouping my money, is that I have Selling Your Screenplay. That's my own podcast, my own website. I have a number of services for screenwriters to help them sell their own scripts. So that's part of this too, is I do look at the pinch as kind of a proof of concept, or sort of a, just a working model. And I've talked about it extensively on my own podcast, about how I made it, how I raised the money, all the different aspects to it. I've just been over the last 3 years talking about this. So I do feel like in some ways it has synergy with what I'm doing with Selling Your Screenplay. And I think hopefully I can sell some additional Selling Your Screenplay services, as well as make it up on just sort of more typical distribution, the Amazon and the iTunes and that kind of stuff, whatever cable deals I can find. But ultimately, I do see it as sort of a marketing piece for Selling Your Screenplay as well.
So that's kind of what happened with me and This Is Meg. That same thing happened, where like I put it out there, but because of the film itself is not the product that's making the money, but it's the marketing that brings the people into purchase consulting or buy other products or join other services that I might provide. So that is a good business model to have if you're able to use it as a lead generator, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And it sounds like too, to some degree, your book is going to be the same sort of thing. It's another angle for you to basically introduce yourself and your brand to these folks.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to get it out there. Now, what fear did you have to overcome to jump from screenwriter to director? Because I know there's a lot of screenwriters listening who like, man, I just wish I could direct my own thing, had the same frustrations as you did, but they're afraid. So what was the fear that you had to overcome to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as someone who's been in Hollywood now for 20 years or 20 plus years, and I've worked on a number of movies, I don't have a lot of on-set experience. Like, truthfully, as a screenwriter, that's not really where the screenwriter spends his time. I've been on the sets of a few of the films that I've written, but, it's not like I've really ever worked on set for any length of time. So that was a big fear. Like, do I even know what to do? Do I know how to direct? Do I know how to produce? I mean, I think the producing maybe came a little more naturally to me because I'm producing podcast episodes and websites and that kind of stuff. And it wasn't wholly a different process, really. It's organizing people and that kind of stuff. So the producing maybe, probably worked out, but I really just didn't know. It's that fear of the unknown, putting yourself out there, doing things. And I was doing it in a public way. I mean, I talk about it on my podcast. I did the Kickstarter campaign. So I'm doing this in a very public way. And I didn't feel like I was the most, I never really directed anything. I directed, a couple of very, very low budget shorts type of a thing. Right. So I think it's just a matter of getting over that fear. And what I learned was what I could see, it's like, and especially being in LA, getting crew, getting cast, bringing people together, and going out and shooting this thing. What I could see was that everybody kind of felt the same way. No one wanted to put their hand up and be the leader. And if you're willing to take that leap and be the leader, there's tons of cool, hardworking, smart, talented people that are willing to go on that journey with you. But it's just a matter of someone standing up and sort of taking that responsibility of being the actual leader. And again, that's not something that I think comes naturally to me. It's not something that I just feel like I'm well suited for. But I just felt like this is what I need to do to bring my film to life.
Now, should screenwriters learn how to become filmmakers? Is that a skill set that a lot of screenwriters should do if they want to try to at least add some more tools to that toolbox of theirs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't know that there's a right answer. Like, I'm not someone that's trying to tell people exactly how they should go with their career or whatnot. I mean, I think the typical sort of trajectory of a screenwriting career is you move to Hollywood, you write a bunch of sort of bigger studio fare without much consideration of budget. And that's fine if you spend a few years doing that, submit to the contest, really go for broke when you're first out here. But if things aren't working out, maybe then start to retool a little bit and maybe start to write some of these lower budget genre films and see if you can sell some of those, see if you can get some of those optioned. And then again, if that doesn't necessarily work out, maybe then consider being a filmmaker as well. But it's really about you and what you want out of your career. As I said, the producing, I kind of feel like came a little more naturally to me than the directing. And I actually kind of feel like I enjoy the producing aspect of the whole process. So I would definitely continue to do that as a writer, producer. Maybe I find someone that wants to direct, something like that. But I definitely think for myself, it's not necessarily that I'm telling other people this is the path you should take. It's about understanding what is meaningful to you and then figuring out what path will work for you. For me, the creative fulfillment is really why I got into this. And so, I mean, of course, if someone came and said, hey, I'll pay you $1 million to write the next Transformers movie, of course I would do it. But I'm not, no one's ever going to do that because I'm not spending my time, in that sort of trajectory, going down that path to get into a position that someone would ever actually make that offer. I'm going down this trajectory, which I think will be meaningful for me, and I hope other people can get some wisdom, some advice from that, and maybe that can help them in their own journey.
Now, what advice would you give screenwriters who are afraid of taking that leap into filmmaking?
Well, I think that's a good question, and I think the key, and I think this is where maybe I did have a little bit of an edge, just being around the business, being involved with other friends' productions over the years, is that I have been exposed to production. I've never really worked on set, so that would be my advice. If you're new to this, you're a screenwriter, just literally write something that's 3 or 4 pages that you can shoot with your iPhone and 2 actors or 1 actor for that matter. Get your friends, get 2 friends that can act a little bit and just go do a short and just try and build, one step at a time. I just think people, they think that, oh, I'm going to go make this movie. Oh, but how can I raise $20 million? And I get these emails. I got an email from a guy the other day. Hey, how can I contact Meryl Streep? I'm like, I don't think Meryl Streep is
taking your calls.
Right. I don't know anything. What's that?
I don't think she's taking your calls.
Yeah, it's like, and I don't think. And again, I don't want to poo-poo anybody. And then he's like, okay, maybe Meryl Streep. What about Helen Mirren and Judi Dench? It's like, I mean, those are going to be tough gets, And I think people want to run before they walk. And, so often we hear about these stories of someone being plucked from obscurity. But if you really were to sit those people down, there probably is about, 10 or 20 years of hard work before they get plucked from obscurity. And just, people don't fully realize it. So I would say walk before you run. Go do a super simple short film on your iPhone, get some free editing software and just put something together and then try and grow from there. Take, a little bit of a bigger leap on the next one.
Can we just stop for 1 second and let's just go back to that one thing that you said about the guy who called and looking. It's like, how can I get a hold of Meryl Streep? The reason why I want to focus on that question is to you and I, we understand how ridiculous that request is. That there's no shot in God's green earth that Meryl Streep's going to do.
And here's the thing. Like, you never know. Like, as soon as I tell that guy, there's no chance Meryl Streep or her agent is going to return your call. Like, if you're a good enough salesman, it might work.
Okay, look, so all right, so I'll tell this story, but okay, but I want to just, before I tell this story,
Yeah.
the story I'm about to tell you it's an outlier. It's a rarity. It doesn't happen. If you look at Meryl Streep's entire career, just be intelligent enough to go to her IMDb. How many indie film first-time directors has she worked with? How many films has she made that's less than $20 million in her career? And recently, what is she doing? So like, just be logical about it, guys. I know we all have delusions of grandeur. We all have like, I think we can make this happen. I really think Halle Berry's right for this role. She's perfect. I'm like, sure, I'm sure Hugh Jackman would be perfect for your next movie. But chances are Hugh's probably busy right now working on $20 million paychecks. So is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? No. Is it possible for you and I to win the lottery? Yes.
And the bigger question is it worth the effort it's going to take? That's the thing. Wouldn't you be better off spending time doing other things than trying to pursue Meryl Streep? Because the chances of her saying yes are so astronomically small that you'd be better off spending that time just trying to raise some money, trying to do something like a low budget short. There's so many other more productive things we could be doing than pursuing Meryl Streep.
But I'm going to tell this story, and I'm afraid to tell it because it might give somebody hope out there, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm going to say it with a caveat that's like, please, this is an outlier. It's like me saying, the way to make it in the business is make a $7,000 action film in Mexico and call it El Mariachi, and then you're just going to be on your way. Like, it doesn't happen like that for everybody. There was two filmmakers, twin brothers, who decided that they wanted to make a movie about their life. Basically, it's their life story with struggles with their father, who was an alcoholic and all this stuff. So they go to the San Francisco Film Festival, and who's speaking? Who's doing the keynote? Ed Harris. Academy Award nominated or winner, I'm not even sure, but Ed Harris, legendary actor.
Yeah.
And this is probably about 10 years ago. And they after the speech, they bum rush the stage, jump behind the curtains, and literally do a quick 2 set, like Ed, we have to do you perfect, like this situation, exactly what we're talking about. Like, this would never happen in a million years because it was a film festival, and because of all that. They got to Ed without any security stopping them. They had a DVD player with a trailer that they shot on 35 millimeter back then, and they showed, like, Ed, can you just please watch this? And Ed going, let's go. He went out back in the alley and smoked up a cigarette. He goes, all right, you guys got 5 minutes, go. And he showed him the trailer, and then they pitched the story to him, and they're like, we want you to play our alcoholic father. And he did it.
Huh.
He did the movie. It's the only independent film he's ever done. His agents tried to torpedo it. CAA was like, no, Ed, you're not doing it. And Ed finally said, I don't care what anyone says. I'm making this movie. And it connected with Ed on a completely emotional level. I don't know what Ed had to deal with in his past. Maybe he just saw it. Maybe he just wanted to help these two kids. I don't know what it was. But it was all about, and Ed did it. Ed did it. It wasn't a big hit. It was, the guys wrote a book about it, about how they were able to get Ed. Basically, their advertising for the movie it started off with an interview with Ed Harris. Like, that was the card that they had. And they used, I've never in a million years seen an interview, like a trailer for a movie start off with the filmmakers and Ed Harris talking. Like, that's the trailer, not behind the scenes, the trailer. Yeah. Anyway, so long story short.
That's the great thing about our business, though, is it can happen. You just have to understand that
it's not likely it's going to happen.
Yeah. And pick your battles carefully, because the more efficient you can be with your time, the better chance you'll have.
No question at all. But again, please, anyone listening, it's kind of like Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, exactly.
No. Yes, we all have a chance to, get married to Angelina Jolie one day, or Charlize Theron should come over. Is there a chance that happens? Sure. It's like the lottery. Is it likely? Probably not. So please keep your delusions of grandeur, inside a little bit more, but yet go for it. Now, the question that you wanted me to ask you, and I wanted to ask you as well, is this worth it? Is this whole making low budget films, chances are we're not going to make our money back, kind of experience, and because that's exactly what you said. It was like, is it worth it? That was the question we started talking about when we got on the phone, on the Skype. We're like, is this worth it? So what do you think, sir?
Yeah. And you can pipe in as well. I mean, I think where I am in my own life, I have a wife, I have 2 kids. Yeah. And so I look at the time. My time is incredibly valuable right now. I want to spend time with my kids, obviously my wife. So it's just, the time is like where the shortage is. So when I'm spending time doing these movies versus actually doing something that I know is going to make me more money, it's a tough thing. And I feel guilty sometimes about it. It's not that I don't love the filmmaking process or the creative process. I do. And I think that's why I keep coming back to it. But I do feel a little bit guilty. And I knowing that, I'm really doing this for me. I'm not, this isn't for my family. I'm making this movie. It's not for my family. My family has to put up with it, so it's just a time thing. So I don't know. And I go back and forth, and I just know how much money, I've made as a screenwriter in my career versus some of the other things I've done, like selling your screenplay or like some of the other websites that I've created over the years and set up. It's just, the amount of effort that it takes to earn $1 is significantly easier in other pursuits than it is in filmmaking or screenwriting. So I don't know. I have a good answer for you, but I waffle back and forth.
I feel that it's a virus that you're bitten with at a certain part of your life. You get bitten by this bug, and it's viral. There's no cure for it. Exactly. It could flare up, and it could be dormant, but it always lives with you when you have it. And believe me, I left the business for 3 years. To go do something more ridiculous in the film business, which is a whole other book and a whole other movie. But at the end of the day, if it fulfills you as an artist, if it fills you as a human being, as a soul, if you can figure out how to make a balance of it, meaning like you have time with your family, you don't like go crazy like, Howard Hughes or Ed Wood or any of these kind of characters who just like completely lost themselves in it. Especially, and also like, you and I are at a certain age that our priorities are a little different. Like when we were 20, it was a whole other conversation, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah. When you didn't have kids and you didn't have a wife, you could spend 18 hours a day doing something and sleep 2-3 hours and drink Mountain Dew and go to Taco Bell all day.
Yeah.
Those days are over. But at the end of the day, I feel that if it's something that fulfills you, find a balance, find a way to make it happen, find a way to do it for yourself. But I agree with you. Sometimes you're making something just like you're rolling the dice. Like maybe this is the thing that's going to take me to the next level. Maybe it's not. But if you're enjoying the process and you can afford the process, then do it. Because unfortunately, we do live in a very we do play in a very expensive sandbox. Mm-hmm. It's much cheaper to do what you do all the time, which is screenwriting. It's extremely cheap to screenwrite.
Yeah, that's true.
It's extremely affordable, and you could do that all day, every day. But making that film, a little bit pricey.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's sound advice. I think you're right, and I think balance, and I think that is what I've tried to do is find some sort of a balance where I don't just spend my entire day making movies. I do have other things that I'm trying to do and keep the trains running.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what advice would you give a screenwriter trying to break into the business today?
Well, I think to some degree what I said, I think you're really thinking about what you want as your own career, how you want your career to go. And then, figuring out how that's going to actually take place. I mean, if you really are determined to be, a studio level screenwriter and you understand what that's all about, that's a different trajectory. I think that's more writing higher end scripts, not necessarily low budget. The contests, the ink tip, the blacklist, entering those kinds of things and getting things. If you're looking at more of sort of art house cinema, and I know there's a number of filmmakers out there that I bump into, and that's all they really want, and that's totally fine. So I think, boiling it back, what advice would I have? I think the biggest advice I would have is go out and just start doing stuff. I get so many emails from people. I submitted my script to 2 places and they didn't like it. It's like, 2 places, when you hit 2,000 places, then we can start to say, okay, maybe nobody wants this thing. But I just don't think people fully understand the amount of effort that this is going to take. You're not going to walk up to Yankee Stadium and say, hey, man, when are the tryouts? It's like, can't you just get me? I know you're playing the Red Sox tonight. Can't you just get me on the field for a couple pitches? It's like, no, that's not how it works. do some due diligence of your own when you're strategizing your career. Look at some of these people. We were just talking about Meryl Streep, and it's like you just said, well, I bet she hasn't done a movie that's less than 20 million. It's like, go look at those screenplays for the Meryl Streep movies that she's done over the last 10, 15 years, 20 years, and I would almost guarantee that the screenwriters of those scripts are not first-time writers.
No.
Just exactly what you said about things. Maybe there's a couple in there, and you hear these stories like the Clint Eastwood movie last year was a first-time writer.
The Mule?
I think
yeah, but the point is, the 15, 17.
It was a Spielberg movie. I think it was the Spielberg movie, the one about the newspaper. And I think
it was. Yeah, she was. Yeah, she was. She was a first
I think
time.
It actually had Meryl Streep in
it. But you have Eastwood and Spielberg producing it. Like it's not.
Yeah.
Does it happen?
It is.
Yes.
That's the bigger problem is that we hear these stories, so we think that that's sort of how it happens, and that's the exception, not the rule. And I think if you go and look at there's one of those. So Meryl Streep's, let's say, done 20 movies in the last 20 years. There's one of those. But if you go look at the other 19, my guess is those screenwriters had a long list of probably working in television, moving over to features. And it's like, that's what you need to do. Look at the careers you want to have. Look at what those people have done, and then start at the beginning. You don't need to start with Transformers if you want to write action movies. You need to start with, whoever's lower than Jean-Claude Van Damme action movies. You'll get there eventually.
Steven Seagal.
Yes, exactly. Steven Seagal. I think he's been relegated to the Me Too movement. But some of these guys, some of these low budget. If you want to write high budget action movies, start with a low budget action movie.
And to review the Post, I mean, yes, she might have been a first time screenwriter, but Meryl didn't sign on because of the script alone. Mm-hmm. She signed up because it was a call of Stevie Spielberg and Clint producing. Like, I mean, come on, that kind of team. Of course, it's gonna. If she's like, she was like in the mafia, and then Spielberg's like, oh, she's with me, and it just walked in and like, oh, she's a good fella. Like it's Donnie Brasco all of a sudden. Sorry about all the mob references. It's still
I got you.
Now, can you tell me the book that had the biggest impact in your life or career?
I would have to say that Sid Field's Screenplay was the book that, and not so much that I think it's the best book, but it was just the book that I read when I was 22 years old. Yeah. Someone told me about it, and all of a sudden that was sort of method to the madness. Like, it was the first screenwriting book I really read that kind of just said, listen, there's a structure to this. There's a sort of just a method to the madness. I would say Blake Snyder's Save the Cat is a book I've read more recently, and I would recommend it. I think he did kind of a better job of breaking things down than Sid Field. So if you're only going to read one book, I would say I would recommend that. The other book that I recommend, and it was an actor, when I moved out to LA, he recommended it, was The Art of Dramatic Writing by Leas Egri. And it's geared towards playwriting, but it's very much geared towards character and developing character. And Sid Field and Blake Snyder, they're all about structure, the 3-act structure, the turning points, these kinds of things. Whereas Egri is all about character and character in story. And so I think they're a good balance. Like, those 3 books, if you read them, you'll have a pretty good understanding of sort of dramatic writing.
Now, what's the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Yeah, I think it would be just learning that there has to be a market behind what you're doing in order to sell your material. And, like most people, when they get out to LA and they just decide they're going to be screenwriters, you're just writing your crazy ideas. You're not necessarily sitting there thinking about, well, could this really be a movie that a producer could take and sell to HBO or sell to Lifetime? Like, is there an actual market for this thing? And I don't know why. Maybe I'm just stubborn, but it just took me a while to kind of learn that lesson and start honing. And really, a lot of it was sort of trial by error. I was just writing some scripts that I liked, and some of them were resonating with some of these low budget producers. And that's kind of how I started to realize that, hey, some of these producers are actually out there making a lot of these movies. Maybe I could write scripts more like what they're actually producing.
And 3 of your favorite films of all time.
And I'm sure, most guys in their 40s, Star Wars was definitely a huge influence. Like, I was that Star Wars generation. I was a young kid. I went to the theater and actually saw the original Star Wars in the theater, when I was a very, very small child. So it was like very much sort of my formidable years growing up with the Star Wars toys and the Star Wars movies. Some of the more recent movies, I love Shawshank Redemption. I mean, it's, you go back and watch a movie like that. It's like, this is why we're doing it. It's like these movies are just so great. I love a lot of the Quentin Tarantino stuff. I just saw Hateful Eight. I think it was at least up until 3 months ago, it was on Netflix. And that was a movie that, a lot of my screenwriting buddies, kind of poo-pooed and stuff. So I never got around to watching it. And I finally went and watched it 3 months ago. And it is a great movie, Hateful Eight. From a screenwriting perspective, there's just so many great scenes. So much great, drama, tension, innuendo, just the dialogue, the acting.
No question.
Yeah,
and now where can people find you and the work you do?
Sure. So as I've mentioned, sellingyourscreenplay.com is my blog and podcast. So you can always find me over there. And all my links to Twitter and Instagram and Facebook are on there, just in the upper right-hand corner. I also am selling The Pinch through Selling Your Screenplay. If you go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/thepinch, all lowercase, you can actually buy it directly from my site. And you can actually bundle it for an extra $5. I will sell the 3-hour webinar that I did, the making of The Pinch. So you can bundle that with the film if you want to see the movie and The Pinch. The Pinch is also available now on Amazon and iTunes and wherever, video on demand at this point is available.
That's so awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming in, man, and dropping some knowledge on the tribe today. And I wish you nothing but success, sir, on your insane journey through this business, as we all do.
And likewise, Alex. Yeah, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. And I wish you all the luck on your projects as well.